It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
And welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Breakfast as we chug along during our working week up to a Wednesday today. Yes, property news and information. We do that 7 days a week as heard on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts and Amazon. It is the 17th of July. So as I mentioned yesterday, we are well into the month. And you might have seen and heard of these capsule hotels, which are a pod hotel, particularly popular in Japan. There isn't much to them. Like the name suggests, they are a small pod. And from Japan, they have made their way all the way down under to Australia. They are now available for rent in Sydney. How much is the question I had when I first heard the story? Well, the answer is $300. But would you consider living permanently in a pod for $300? Or is this the way that the rental market has gone in Sydney? Is this a good idea? The capsule living is located in the CBD of Sydney. And if you'd like to join the conversation and let us know, tell us what you're thinking. Is this a way to save money for property saving? We are interested in your thoughts and comments. The email address, as always, is myrealestatepodcast@gmail.com. And of course, to be able to buy a property, you will need to get a mortgage, which isn't that easy when applying in this market, especially for first home buyers. What are lenders looking for at the moment, and how can the process be streamlined for you? Because we like it as easy as possible, especially with the information that we impart. And Rebecca Baddeley from Loan Market Geelong is joining us this morning. Welcome, Rebecca, to the Real Estate Breakfast. I just want to circle back to pod living. What do you reckon? Could you handle living in a pod?
Look, I don't think it's for everybody, but definitely would have its advantages, especially if you're someone that just needs to rest their head and revamp for the next day, I think.
I reckon it's probably not a bad idea for construction workers. You know, they might be working 14-hour days and literally they go and grab their dinner after work and crash out, and they're up at about 5:30 in the morning. I can see that working, but, you know, if you're working from home, it's a bit of a nightmare.
Yeah, that would be a very interesting and quite a confined space, I would say.
Yeah, not for everybody, that is for sure. Now, the mortgage application process, this is what we're going to talk about this morning, because it can be, as I mentioned, a bit of a nightmare for people going through this whole qualifying pre-approval stages and different steps. Some people don't really factor that into the whole equation application process, do they?
No, I would say sometimes potentially it hasn't been factored in, but also that when people are coming to us, you know, there is time constraints and they already are under some other pressures as well. So kind of understanding that process is really important.
And do you find that people, you know, when they find out the process, it's like a bit of a light bulb moment, a little bit of an illumination where they go, holy moly, this is more than what I sort of bargained for?
Yeah, and I think it's our job as mortgage brokers to have that education piece and make sure people really understand what the process is from the beginning so that they don't have to feel like that again and that they do feel prepared going into buying a property.
Now, I actually talk to a lot of different mortgage people, mortgage brokers like yourself, and that is the way that you describe it. They describe it the same way as the education piece, because that is the vital part. If you're a mortgage broker, you got to have that educational piece. Now, we should talk about the gathering of documents and information that people need to get their heads around to prepare for a mortgage application, because the rules and the criteria are always changing. So in 2024, Rebecca, what do borrowers need for their mortgage application?
Yeah, sure. So looking at the four main things, I would say ID, so having 100 points of ID, income documents, whether that's pay slips or self-employed tax returns, bank statements, looking at a 3-month period of bank statements, and being able to show what your commitments or your liabilities are. And that kind of includes your expenses, but also things like credit cards, HEX statements, any personal loans, or any existing home loans.
Now, I always like to sort of, ask different brokers their experience when it comes to people just not being on the right side of the ledger, because we talk about this being finance fit and ready. You talk about the HEX, the car loans, the credit cards. Some people just simply do not sort of put their brain into gear and start sort of thinking about, hang on, all of this stuff on the wrong side of the ledger. I've really got to sort of pay attention to this because I'm wanting as much money from the bank as possible. Is that what you find?
Yeah, and I think it is really hard because people make decisions at a point in time in their life, and potentially they're not forward thinking to how that will impact them later. Especially, you take HEX as an example, and you're thinking about going to uni and being educated, and that potentially doesn't flow through to how that's going to affect a loan process in 5 years perhaps. So I think understanding how that's going to impact you financially, back to that education piece, is really important. But there are quite a few different factors in that as well. So I think having some advice and some guidance around those things is very important.
Yeah, that's a good point that you actually raised there in terms of the HEX and the education part. I think a lot of people might be thinking, well, the banks will sort of look upon my degree rather favourably because I'm going to be able to get out there in the world. I'm going to be able to earn some really good money. But, of course, banks don't care about any of that. All they care about is serviceability and whether you can actually pay the mortgage.
Yeah, that's 100% right. And I think the scary thing is, especially with HEX, is that is potentially a debt or a liability that is going to stay with people for some time, because until you're making very decent money, that tends to go up and not down. And there are other factors in that, but that is definitely something that we're seeing affect people more so over the last 12 months or 18 months than what it did potentially 3 or 4 years ago.
All right, so we are talking with Rebecca. We're talking mortgages this morning and some of the pitfalls. We'll come back in just a moment and we'll pick up on the conversation next.
We dive deep into topics like buying, selling, investing, and maximising your property's value. From mortgage advice to the latest property data, your real estate journey starts here. It's time to go back to the Real Estate Vault for this week's property comment.
It's been an interesting ride, really. So when we got to this house, it obviously needed to be fully renovated, and we've been living here throughout. So it's been a little bit challenging. We've had to be creative with the way that we live. We're currently actually washing up in the laundry, so it's been a bit of a challenge, but we're slowly getting there. 5 months down the track, and we're probably finished in a month. I'd say 2 months.
Aren't you quite close to the beach where you are?
Yeah, so we're about 5 minutes from the beach, and we have beautiful views from upstairs, so we can actually see out to Manly.
So you haven't been falling in love with this property. In other words, starting to think, gee, do we really want to flip this property? Perhaps we should keep it.
Yes,
I suppose that's always the challenge, especially when you put your touch to it. You tend to fall in love with the property, but I think in the long run it would be silly for us not to. But certainly, yes, we do get attached, especially me.
We talk to the most knowledgeable real estate experts across Australia every day. from 6 a.m.
And it is a Real Estate Wednesday. We are talking mortgages with Rebecca Baddeley from Loan Market there in Geelong. Rebecca, lenders, as I mentioned, assess mortgage applications differently these days because people need to keep pace of what they need to satisfy a lender. So perhaps just enlighten our listeners from the other side of the fence, and that is from the lender's side, the lenders and what factors are most important in their decision making.
Yes, so I would say, as you touched on, obviously lots of lenders, lots of different criteria, but there are some key main points that all lenders will look at, and that's kind of coming down to credit score or the health of your credit score, income stability, or how you're going to show that that is something that you've got and is ongoing. Obviously balancing that income with expenses, or what are your ongoing liabilities and how are they factored in. And the other one would be deposit or security. What's your skin in the game as a consumer, and how are you going to show the bank that you're not a liability?
Yeah, that's the key one, is show the bank that you're not a liability. And there are a ton of challenges that people are also facing as they navigate the tricky mortgage space. Perhaps step over some of those common ones that people face during the mortgage application process in particular.
Credit history and your credit score is really important, and probably is something that potentially people haven't looked at if they haven't been in the mind frame of getting a loan or talking about their credit. So I would say that is probably the first thing that we see issues with, and there are lots of ways to resolve that, but becoming aware of that and knowing what that score looks like is super important. Savings, deposit, being able to, although you might be able to repay the loan, being able to have that deposit is sometimes quite challenging. So being able to work through options like family guarantees or the government schemes, or potentially lenders that don't need as much of a deposit as others, is also a really good option. And the other would be probably job security. You know, we've seen a lot after COVID that people are changing roles, or in the times at the moment, potentially they've needed new jobs. So being able to work through if someone's changed roles, or, you know, length of self-employed income is probably another hurdle that is quite common.
Yeah, and just in terms of the self-employed, I think a lot of people get quite frustrated, like they've gone, perhaps they were in a salaried position, they've gone into working for themselves, but they might only have been working for themselves for 7, 8, 9 months. They're showing some, decent coin there, but that's definitely a bit of a hurdle, because some banks kind of look at that and go, well, this is this whole viability, are you a good bet? Well, it's a new business.
Yes, for sure. And we're very lucky as mortgage brokers to have a lot of choice around lenders. There's lenders that 100% will be fine with that, and that's not a hurdle we have to cross, but it's about making sure that we put our clients in the best place they can be with a lender that suits their requirements, needs, and how their income is derived.
All right, we'll leave it there, Rebecca. Great to catch up with you this morning and throw some of those pointers out for our listeners, and some great points that you've made. Hey, thanks for coming on to the Real Estate Breakfast, and enjoy your Wednesday.
You too. Have a great day.
Every week, real estate transactions take place as the market shifts month by month. And every day, we keep you better informed and updated on the Real Estate Podcast. We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.